Ready? Play.
Hello, or should I be saying good day, mate, to Damien. We're on the eve of the first Grand Slam of the year. We're going to be doing a bit of preview on that. Damien, how are you doing? How are you this January?
Yeah, oi, mate.
Yeah.
No, honestly, January is pretty tough for me, time zone wise, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm still recovering from the qualifying, but now we have to hit the Australian Open courts again. I think it's in 11 hours that the main draw play starts. Yeah, more or less, a little under 11 hours by now. So super excited to get it going. Of course, it's also the first time we have the Sunday start, which is really cool. I think really there's not a single person in the world that will get hurt by this. It's only good for the event, for the promotion of the sport, for the people who will come to watch, for us to even have a more diluted pool of matches, for us to get to see more in the first 3 days as well, because of course the first two can get very hectic in the other system. Not that this won't be hectic, it still will be a lot of matches at the same time, but at least we'll get to see more thanks to that. And of course we still have some ATP 250 results to talk about, but of course you guys won't be surprised. The main thing here today will be the Australian Open.
Yeah, absolutely. Plenty to get through. We've got some tasty first round ties in the Australian Open, some content, as you say. Matthew's touched on it there in the chat. Draper Lehechka first thing this morning, and I suppose a surprise winner in Tabilo in Auckland. So we'll go through that, and then we'll just look at the draw, look at the people who can challenge Novak Djokovic for his bid to go for 25, his 11th Australian Open. Plenty to get through. I suppose no better place to start, Damien, would be, as I say, the Lehechka Jack Draper match. Both players going into that final in Adelaide, looking for their first ATP title. Did you manage to catch any of that?
Just a little bit. My night was a bit ruined by the year, but again, just trying to keep myself awake and etc. There was also a challenger final I was watching around at the same time in Thailand, but I did catch a bit of that. Of course, earlier in the week, I did see plenty of Lehechka and Draper. Great run for both guys. I think for Lehechka, it just takes off so much pressure off him for the Australian Open, because he was defending that quarterfinal. Now he's got 110 points only to cover for, which is not a massive fall in the rankings at all. And Jack, everything we've been saying about him, the fact that if he's going to be healthy, he's going to be playing top 20, top 30 tennis easily.
Yeah,
it's happening.
Yeah, no, totally. I watched, I think Jack Draper, Tommy Paul, and the first set, Jack Draper, Tommy Paul is no mug, and the first set. I suppose maybe Tommy Paul was I don't know if he was struggling with fatigue, but Jack Draper just took the match to him and absolutely steamrolled him. And then at that point, I said to myself, I think Jack Draper's going to win this event. I knew it was Bublik in the next round, because of I'd watched the Musetti match, and at times Bublik was lucky to get through that in some of the games he was playing. So I genuinely thought that Draper was going to come through that, and then Lehechka in the final. Yeah, I suppose it was just a toss of the coin. I suppose two contrasting styles, isn't it? Jack Draper's got a well-known strength in his backhand. Lehechka, just fires rockets with that forehand, and perhaps not as strong in the backhand. Same with maybe Jack Draper on the forehand. And I think that was the kind of main turning point in the match. I think it was at 4-4 in the second set. Of course, Jack Draper won the first set 6-4. And then at 4-4 on the Lehechka serve in the second set, I think it was love 30. And, Lehechka pulled out a volley, which kind of changed the momentum of the match, didn't it? If you saw that, Pat?
I don't think so. I'm not sure which point you're talking about, no.
Yeah, it was 4-4. Draper was putting pressure on the Lehechka serve. And if he'd won 2 more points, he was serving for his first ATP title. Lehechka puts away a volley. I don't know what's going on with my camera, but I'm back. Lehechka puts away, a world-class volley, and the momentum seemed to shift. He seemed to get, a lift from that, and then ended up, taking that second set, and then eventually the match. Draper had, it was 3-1 down. I think he had love 40 on the Lehechka serve in the third set, and then Lehechka managed to pull it back. So yeah, good title for Lehechka. I was thinking about this during the speech, Damien, and I don't know if you agree. I thought Lehechka, would have made more of an impact in 2023, and I think that Murray match at the start of the year, where he pretty much, it was on his racket and Murray fought back as he tends to do. But then he kind of disappeared from the scene.
Yeah, I just hope it doesn't happen again. I hope it's not January, February, because after that, it was like a few flashes here and there, but nothing really, which was maybe a little back to the Lehechka that we knew before the 2023 season. But yeah, this is an amazing start to the year. Of course, I am so excited for him to just maybe start delivering that level again. He clearly has it, I'm not saying he's going to be like a top 10 player in this year, for example. I don't think it's really going to happen, but it should be a more repeatable play style. He's just getting a lot cleaner and in transitioning to the net, and it just should be a little easier for him to do this on a regular basis. Excited to catch him at the Australian Open as well. I think he's got a pretty nice draw to the third round. So even though sometimes these runs just right before the Australian Open or any slam, they tend to just, drain you out of fuel, I think for the Lehechka, it's actually very possible to still have a decent Australian Open showing. Of course, I think he's got like Zverev in the third round, which would be really tough. But still, getting to the third round would be already quite good, along with this run, of course.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he starts off against Zapata Morales, and then it's potential Mickelson or McCabe in round 2. So yeah, a fairly decent a start to the Australian Open, and it'd be interesting to see where he can go. In terms of Jack Draper, of course, a lot of people in the UK. Keen to see how he will get on. Hopefully this will be the big year. I think last year he started against Nadal, didn't he, Jack Draper at the Australian Open? We both know how that went. But in terms of Draper, where is he now? As John points out, it's 2 ATP finals back to back, I think, and 2 losses. But surely it's only a matter of time before he can actually get that ATP title. And can he do anything at the Australian Open?
Yeah, I mean, he also won Bergamo just before that. Challenger, very stacked, first set comebacks against Goffin and Nakashima in the semis and in the final. And then, of course, the final. And the final in Sofia, the final here. That match against Paul that I think Elena is also mentioning, but also you said about it earlier. Like, that's literally one of the best matches that Jack has ever played, I think. And especially on the defense, he was just so flashy with all these counters, passes. Yeah, the forehand, as Elena says, also was just pretty amazing in that one when it comes to the situational shot making. I guess maybe Tommy was trying to target it because sometimes it can break down. But no, on the defense, it was just absolutely stellar. That is for me like one of the best matches I've ever seen from Jack so far. And when it comes to the Australian Open, he has a Giron in the opening rounds. I think a lot will depend on physicality. Tennis-wise, it's probably not too close right now. But when it comes to the fitness, we know that Jack has struggled with it in the past. So this run might take out more out of him than it might for Lehechka, I believe. And also, if he plays Tommy Paul again in the second round, this will very likely be another, like a much closer battle. He could also face Kecmanovic in another rematch in the third round, I think, which would be fun. But I don't know if I see him pulling through Paul, mostly because of the fitness, though.
Yeah, and I think Paul will maybe out for
this run got to him.
I think Paul, it'll be key to see that. I'm sure his team will be looking back at the faults he made in that match, and I think maybe a sense of a revenge on the cards as well. Interesting that Matthew points out, and that was something I noticed in the third set. Draper's forehand, it was very loopy. It was setting up very nicely for Lehechka, and as I said, about 10 minutes ago, Lehechka was just firing bombs and taking control of the rallies very early on, which made it very, very hard for Draper to hang in there. Is that part of Jack's game that you think, the forehand, that he maybe does have to kind of try and get on a par with the backhand?
Yeah, it's a difficult shot to sort of estimate because I think it's definitely one of the best and the worst assets in his arsenal at the same time. Like it does have some limitations when it comes to just offense. It tends to be quite loopy, but at the same time, he can just unleash on it. He maybe cannot really yet dictate with it using all that pace that he has. He kind of is all about that one strike that he gets with it. And also defensively, sometimes it is the weaker shot. But at the same time, I think in a lot of matches, the loop that he has with the forehand, it actually allows him to reset the rallies so easily. I think perhaps especially on clay in the future, this can be a major asset. Draper is not like the other Brits in that they basically cannot play on clay a lot of the time. But Jack is actually going to be good, and I think part of that is actually that forehand. So sometimes it takes away from him, sometimes it gives him a lot of benefits. I think especially being able to get back into the rally with it by adding that extra height, extra elevation on the ball. I think that's really important in his arsenal. It's a bit of a trademark of his for me as well. So I would say that it's a bit of a double-edged sword so far. But overall, the backhand is definitely more solid. I do see a major sort of room for improvement in his forehand, but it's nothing that he cannot really do. I think maybe sort of down the line, it actually could turn out to be the bigger weapon that he possesses. So it's perfectly fine for now, I think, for where he is in his career, even if it has some technical limitations.
Yeah, plenty of time to improve, and plenty of people in the UK will be keeping an eye on Jack. We'll move on because there's still plenty to get through before we even touch base with the big four in the draw. But I want a lot of people listen to this podcast and watch this stream because of your knowledge about players that they may otherwise not be aware of. And I wanted to talk to you and find out more about Chilean qualifier Alejandro Tabillo, I hope I'm saying that right, or Tabillo, claimed his first tour title on Saturday at the ESB Classic in Auckland. The ATP website says it was with a gritty win against Taro Daniel. I think he took out Arthur Feast, did he, in the semi-final? It was just Cam Norrie, I think, in the quarterfinals as well.
That was a walkover, though.
Was it? Right, okay. Right. Do you want to just tell us, I know he's 26, he's a lefty, he's soared 33 places up the Pepperstone ranking. So can you tell us a little bit more about this guy?
Yeah, I mean, his career high is 64, so he's not quite yet where he was 2 years ago, but I think he's actually like a lot better equipped right now to stay on the main tour than when he first got there. At first, he was like overly reliant on that golden swing in February, on the South American clay events. He was even 4-1 up in his first Challenger final, in the Challenger ATP Tour final in the third set against Ramos Vinolas. That was a double break as well. So it was a bit of a big choke from him. So it's amazing for him to get there now. Last year, in fact, after these points dropped, he went down to like 180. And honestly, I didn't think he was coming back so quickly, but he had a ridiculous season at the Challenger level. He went, I think, 41-13. And that included like a patch of not really winning any matches for a month or so. So other than that, it was just absolutely stellar. Of course, a couple of, I think 2 titles, 3 finals maybe, or something like that. And the thing is, he does not have to be a clay specialist, not at all. He was sort of growing up in Montreal as well. So he is a bit of a product of the Canadian system, actually. I don't think he ever represented Canada, but he did grow up in Montreal, so he was trained there. So he is very familiar with hard courts. In fact, before this run, maybe not on the ATP Tour, but at the Challenger level, he did have a few amazing events on hard. One of them, Brasilia, at the end of last year, the title that he finished the season with, but also before, like Puerto Vallarta final, I think Lexington final as well, where he had this famous win against Kokinakis a couple of years back. Yeah, just a very aggressive left-handed player, who has an amazing serve and forehand. The backhand is very flat, can be pretty uncomfortable as well. I think maybe in the past also athletically, he was a little stiff and probably couldn't really handle himself in a rally if the initial aggression didn't fully pan out. But I do find him to be a bit more of a complete player at the moment. And it's amazing for him to get this. Of course, it doesn't mean that he's going to be a huge threat at the Australian Open. In fact, I don't think he's going to be like a top 20 player soon or something like that. But he definitely should stick around on the main tour better, I think, than he has. Than he did when he was in like 2022 when he had that breakout at the Golden Swing. And I think he's playing Kovacevic in the opening round.
Yes, he is,
Open, which is just super tough to call. I don't know if this run will actually hurt him physically. It was pretty short, I guess. The Nori walkover, the straight sets in the final, straight sets in the semis. But yeah, I mean, Tabilo, Kovacevic, they're pretty much at the same level right now for me. So it's not really a reflection of me saying that there's some sort of a problem with Tabilo at the Australian Open. I just think he got an opponent that's pretty much around the same quality. But yeah, fantastic run for him, of course. And it's not one of the weirdest ATP finals we've had ever. I think like Basic Kopil from Sofia, that definitely takes the cake. But I know it is a little maybe left field, but this often happens, a week before a slam, right?
So, yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of the we'll come on to that. That's in my notes, but it's a strange time of year. It's strange for the sport. A lot of players taking time not to play these last couple of weeks. Especially some of the bigger names, which we'll come on to. But yeah, Tabilo's victory makes him the first Chilean to win a hard court tour level title since Fernando Gonzalez in 2007 Beijing, and he's also the first qualifier to win a tour level crown since Cerundolo in 2021 Cordoba. So I thought that was quite an interesting piece. So yeah, two good victories for Tabilo and Lehechka. Shall we move on then to the main event in terms of the draw? Now, I don't want to make it so cliche of where to start, but I thought, why not keep the Nolly fam off my back and start with Djokovic. Where else to go? As mentioned, going for Grand Slam number 25. He's 11th in Australia. He's 5th since he's turned 35, and I think he's 13th since he's turned 30, which would make him make his Grand Slams. He's won more Grand Slams since he's turned 30, which is amazing, especially if you watch tennis in the 80s, 90s. You'd be thinking, what? But yeah, talk to me about Djokovic. I think he's saying now that there is no wrist injury. He's been pain-free since that the de Minaur match. No problem there. I suppose he's got to be pain-free if he's doing all this content with Kyrgios and playing cricket on the court and doing all sorts. So yeah, can we just start off at the top? What about Novak? Is it his to lose?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to who is more likely to stop Djokovic, an injury or the opponents, it's pretty close to a tie, I think. So, so that kind of says it all. And yeah, he's won this event so many times. There's really no reason for him to stop being like the main favorite to win slams yet. That time has not come so far. Of course, he won 3 of them last year. He was in the final of the 4th one. So unless something major happens, unless he suddenly has a bigger drop-off, he's still going to be the biggest favorite for it. Australian Open, maybe especially Wimbledon as well. So it's not, well, at Roland Garros at the US Open right now, maybe we'd be talking about some other contenders, but Djokovic has to be the main one for here, especially if the injury is fine, if it's not going to be anything serious. But, he's before had like the huge abdominal tear against Fritz at the Australian Open, and he still won that event. He survived. He survived that third round and then still won the event. So I guess looking at it, you're just sort of like, how is this guy going to be stopped? And I'm not really sure. Definitely the draw as well was very kind to him. Like in the first 3 rounds, you have no one who could really trouble him. I think Shelton is probably the first player when we're talking about like a non-0% chance to win against Djokovic, like a 0.1, 0.2. But the main thing is that Shelton was pretty awful in Auckland, and like he'll need another. I know he still made the semis, but the returning was back to its 2023 levels. And he'll basically need another Grand Slam peak out of nowhere. We know he's capable of that. But at the same time, if he plays Djokovic at the US Open, he wasn't ready. Like he had that big serve, of course, but he just wasn't ready to play Djokovic. He wasn't ready to use all his assets that effectively and with enough efficiency. And I don't think it's going to happen, overnight. Maybe you could argue that Shanghai, Tokyo, he made a lot of progress there as well. But after Auckland, I cannot really feel confident about Shelton's 1% chance against Djokovic or whatever it is. Yeah. And basically that's what it is for him until the semis. I think Shelton is like the only opponent that could really trouble him because of his unpredictability. Like Tsitsipas in the quarters, Djokovic is not going to be afraid of that. Fritz in the quarters, maybe Djokovic is not going to be afraid of that. So basically, it's only really the other top 4 players that I think could trouble Djokovic. after the PTSD I have from the US Open final, I cannot really believe in Medvedev beating him at the moment. Right. So I think it would go down to Sinner or Alcaraz as like the two more dynamically progressing players compared to Medvedev. Of course, that's because of age, because of where they are in their careers. But I also believe in them sort of throwing in something else after the off-season, coming up with something that will surprise Djokovic.
A new plan.
I don't know what that. Yeah, I don't know what that would be, but still, like coming up with something that Novak will have to adjust to. So basically, these are the only two opponents I think that I really believe in right now when it comes to playing Novak. I think with Alcaraz, it could be. I'm not saying Alcaraz even makes the final because it's a much tougher draw. I don't know if he will, but if we get that final, I think it could work as a bit of a Wimbledon repeat in that.
Yeah.
I don't know if he wins, but once they actually get there, it might be a closer match than it seems. Big test for Sinner if they meet in the semis as well, if he's actually ready to do this again in best of 5 play after, of course, going 2-1 against Djokovic in the last couple of weeks in 2023. But at this point, when it comes to Djokovic or the field, I have to go with Novak.
Well, I mean, and Matthew's posed you a question, and it's a good one. He says, as you can see, Novak did so well in 2023 because of the reduced schedule in 2022. The mistake he has made is not respecting that by playing so much post New York, Saudi, and the United Cup. Had no break. Thoughts? I wanted to mention this. I don't think you see it in any other sports. The fact that, the sport kicks off its calendar pretty much on New Year's Day. Maybe even before that, if you talk about the United Cup, and then within 2 weeks you're into one of the biggest events of the year. Not much of a pre-season, not much of a kind of warm up. A lot of the big players haven't even played a match this year, but they're going to be playing in a Grand Slam. Matthew makes the point that maybe Novak should have maybe taken a step back, but I know he's very proud of being a Serbian and he likes to represent them. But thoughts on Matthew's question?
Yeah, I think his 2023 schedule was still fairly limited. Although I have to say that, the Davis Cup finals, obviously they were a bit overkill, but well, that's what Novak wanted to do, right? He wanted to win Davis Cup again with Serbia, so that's why he did it. Exhibition, he played one against Carlos. Did he play in the Indian thing as well? I don't even know. I wasn't following that whatsoever. But I think his schedule was still fairly limited, like 12 events or so. He is so good at peaking for the slams at the moment. I don't think this is a major concern. United Cup only had him playing, 2 matches in singles, 2 in mixed as well. So it wasn't a big strain either. He got a lot of rest after that. Yeah, I don't think you can really consider that big a factor for the Australian Open. We'll see how he schedules himself later on, but of course, in the past couple of years, regardless if it was COVID or not, Djokovic has only been playing like 12 events, 11 events, and basically winning half of them. And I honestly don't know if we can expect something different this year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was going to ask that because you mentioned age a little bit about, the fact that I think he's 37 now, isn't it? Surely there must come a time, just biologically, that these young guns, like for instance, Sinner and Alcaraz, surely just biologically these guys should have the edge of him, but he just continues to defy. But there must come a time that the body maybe just doesn't move as well as, despite all the different regimes and the different fitness stuff that he does. Surely they just like biologically, there is going to be a time where he just can't match the younger men. Yeah,
we thought that was going to be 3 or 4 years ago.
I know. Why am I saying this? I know it's going to be. He's probably going to win all 4 this year and do the calendar slam, and I'm going to get this clipped up by John.
It's somewhat possible, but I think even if he lost half a step, it's not very visible, partially because he's more aggressive, because he's serving better. So over the years, he's done a lot of work to make sure that this doesn't hit him as early as possible. We've definitely had players who at 37 look a lot worse than Novak.
Yeah, of course.
So I just think that for now, we haven't really seen anything to suggest it. Yeah. But that day is coming. When it will happen?
I was going to say, though, a lot of the matches that I watched last year, it gave opponents a look in sense like, a lot of opponents took a set off him here or there. Laszlo Djere, I think it was 2 sets to live up, but as soon as, the third set started, you just knew it was going to be a 5-set win for Novak. Do you think, the fact that maybe in some of these matches, some players are getting the odd set off him, is that maybe a mark of, the fact that maybe he isn't playing as well? I mean, a lot of commentary last year was he's probably playing as well as he's ever done. So I just wanted to get your views on, is there any kind of reading into that sometimes he maybe starts a little bit slower, gives an opponent a set, and then, has to fight back, which he inevitably does?
Well, at the US Open, it was just the 2 sets against Jarre, right? At the Australian Open, it was the 1 set against Kouakou. I guess the French was a little different, and Wimbledon was a little different.
Yeah.
But, well, Wimbledon, was he losing many sets? One
I think
to Rublev, one to Hurkacz.
Yeah,
but Hurkacz was like absolutely peaking on the day. Rublev maybe the first set, but I think in a lot of these matches, especially the one against Jarre, but also like the last couple of years, we've had a lot of these for Novak. For example, when Sinner leads him 2-love at Wimbledon, or when Norrie the day after leads him, or the 2 days after actually leads him 1-love at Wimbledon in the semis, you never really feel like they've done anything to get there. Like it's just Novak being a little sloppy for a set. And I guess, this is a part of his game recently, but it's also not really been taken advantage of too much. Like, it's only really happened in matches where he can afford it. And it's been a while, in fact, when like someone went up 2-love, 2 sets to love against him, and it was because of just playing extremely well. It's mostly because Novak is just kind of off. But I think it's been happening that at some points the physical side of it has been a little much for him. I think maybe the 3rd set against Alcaraz at Wimbledon is the prime example.
Okay.
So he is kind of sort of known to have a bit of a physical dip now in the longer format, in a longer best-of-5 match. But it never really was like, okay, so he is down now, and the match is over. It's always like a 30-minute crisis, which in the case of Wimbledon, I think it was actually vital. It was so important to the result of the match as well. But he was back in it in the 4th set. He was back in it in the 5th set. So it's been happening a little bit, but probably still a lot less than you would expect. A lot less than you would expect at the age of Djokovic.
Yeah, I think I'm maybe getting conflated with, sometimes in the Masters events that he's won, a lot of them have been 3-setters, and so a couple of questions, and then we'll move on to Alcaraz. Elena is asking, well, Damien, who is the Enzo Kouakou this year? I don't think Prisma is not yet, at least.
Yeah, I don't think Prismic will take a set. I think Matthew was also asking about him. So Dino Prismic, he won Roland Garros Juniors last year. He had a couple of good major runs already. Stockholm, he had Umag semis, Stockholm quarters, but I don't think he's fully ready yet. Like, he is definitely an elite mover. He's very good athletically. He slides into the backhand, in a very modern tennis type of way. He's very consistent, for sure. He kills a lot of opponents with it, but at the same time, there's still a lot of development in terms of, just pop on his strokes, dictating, taking initiative. So I think the qualifying campaign that he had was actually pretty easy for him. Djokovic may be the only threat in the 2nd round, so it wasn't like a massive effort. I think in most spots in the draw, Prismic wouldn't be able to win a match. Against Djokovic, I just expect a lot of rhythm for Novak, which is never really a good thing. I think the match might last long because the rallies will be long, probably. The rallies will be extended. But it's not exactly an opponent that takes the racket away from you. And I don't think that will work well against Novak. So I would expect a pretty boring match there, actually. I think Prismic for now is like a little worse than his results would suggest, if that makes sense. Usually we say it the other way around, but I do think some of the results that he's getting is a little bit of a head scratcher. Of course, he's got a wonderful base to build upon. Being 18, being in the top like 150 or wherever he is right now, or around that mark. And I do love his prospects going forward, but for now, I think there's still a lot to work on there.
Yeah, and of course, making his Grand Slam debut, and then there is a chance of, we live in hope, but there is a chance of Djokovic meeting Andy Murray on the way, but Andy Murray has to get through Thomas Echeverry first, and or Gail Monfils as well, or Young Habman. But we'll move on to Alcaraz then. just because, as I say, we've got a few others to kind of feature. But I was thinking this morning, as we approached the US Open at the tail end of last year, or August, September, the whole narrative, media pundits, fans of the game were just like, it's written in stone, it's already made, it's going to be a Djokovic Alcaraz final, because of what had happened at Wimbledon, because of what had happened at Cincinnati. People were talking like these two players are, far and away the best players on the tour. We come into it now, and Sinner is in the mix. Medvedev, is getting spoke about. It's not the same narrative, is my point. And in those 6 months, is that all down to Jannik Sinner, closing the gap on maybe Alcaraz and Djokovic, or is it because Alcaraz maybe hasn't, reach the levels as he did maybe at Wimbledon? So yeah, I just wanted to kind of explore that, because I don't know, I think Alcaraz was very tired towards the end of last year. So I just wanted to look at his chances. He's got a tricky draw, as you mentioned earlier on. I think it's Gasquet in the first, and then it's potentially Evans in the second. Zverev, very dangerous, probably the fifth favourite out of the top four. So let's look at Alcaraz. What are you thinking?
Yeah, when it comes to the general narrative, I think it's definitely more of a 2-4 type of group right now. Whereas, at the US Open, we are all thinking, okay, they played each other in the final in Cincinnati. There's likely going to be a rematch. Of course, Medvedev swooped in, so it's not like someone random took out Alcaraz either. It was just someone who has a generally pretty unpleasant matchup against him. That's why it wasn't to be expected. But Djokovic never really, of course, close other than that Jerry match to falling out of the event. But here it's definitely different. And I think both things you mentioned are the reasons why both Sinner stepping up, because even though before the US Open, he won the first ATP 1000 event in the warm-up swing, it wasn't like this. Like it still felt like a great step for him, but it definitely didn't feel like something that really announces himself as, a top 4 player. Whereas even the Beijing 500, that already did, the Alcaraz Medvedev wins back to back. And from that point onwards, of course, Sinner has been sensational. Like there's literally just one aspect of the game he hasn't excelled at yet, and that's best of 5 play. So it is a bit of a test for him. And at the same time, yes, Alcaraz had a mediocre for his standards second half of the year, I would say. It's not like he didn't have any good matches, but certainly there was like a lack of, a title somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not going to be his favorite swing ever, but at least in China, he should be doing better. Of course, I'm not really, I wasn't expecting anything from him at the ATP finals, but still, he made the semis. It wasn't a horrible event for him by any means, really. So, I think he's going to be fine. He had a lot of time to prepare. In the warm-up swing, he only played that exhibition against Novak, where, of course, we don't really put that much stock into it. But still, I think they consider themselves the 2 biggest rivals, and neither wanted to lose that one. That's for sure. So at least we know that he's ready, he's healthy. I think Carlos, even a couple of days ago, said, or maybe yesterday, today, he said that basically he would really like to play Djokovic in the final, which again kind of shows, how he's treating it. Like he has Djokovic as the top rival, and he wants to play him in the final. And I think Djokovic would say the same. I think even though Sinner has improved so much and has given him so much trouble, it would be weird if after Wimbledon and Cincy he didn't treat Alcaraz as the biggest rival. Definitely, it's not a given that Alcaraz will make it there. Gasquet, it's a super easy opening round, but after that it can already get tricky. Daniel Evans, we've had him play twice last year, both matches, exceptional shot making. They clearly enjoy each other, sort of company on the court, and the vibe that they have, the fun that they have with each other. But it was a tough match both times. You've got Bublik, who's always so unpredictable. You also have potentially Tommy Paul in the forefront, who was a very tough rival for Alcaraz. Yeah, exactly. And like he just takes away a lot of the strengths with the drop shots, and maybe also with how Tommy Paul is just counterpunching very close to the baseline. He really takes a lot of time away from Carlos. So it's a tricky matchup. Draper as well has been a tough opponent for him if it's Draper in the fourth round. So it's not easy. I would still expect him to make the semis. But yes, Zverev, I would agree that after the United Cup, he jumped up to a 5th favorite for me over Rune.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think you can get much trickier in terms of Carlos, especially for a number 2 seed. So been unlucky with the draw. But we watch. Do you think Juan Carlos Ferrero not being there, his coach and mentor, really will that have any adverse effects on him? In terms of the tougher moments, turning to the guy who got him to where he is. Do you think that'll have any impact?
I mean, Alcaraz is definitely someone who interacts a lot with his team, with his coach. There will still be people there with him, so I guess they can sort of cover for Ferrero in a way. They won't be able to give him the same technical advice, maybe, or tactical, but I'm sure he still has someone else there who will be granting at least some of that. The thing with Alcaraz, there are two big storylines right now, and like one of them is that Ferrero won't be there, and the other is that he didn't play a warm-up. And if he loses, like in the semis, in the final, he wins the title, no one will be talking about that at all. But if he loses early, then we cannot escape from that topic. So I guess we probably will, either have a shot of discussing this later, or it simply won't be relevant. But I don't know if that's a huge thing to consider. He's definitely had events where he played without Ferrero in the past and done well. So I guess it's not a major thing, but for a player who interacts with his coaching box so much, it actually is a bit of a change, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's got the experienced Samuel Lopez, who will be taking charge in Ferrero's absence. I think Matthew quite rightly points out it's a knee operation for Ferrero. And I'm just looking at a quote that Carlos had said, and they just mentioned, it's hard not having Juan Carlos here because he travels almost every tournament. He only misses one or two. But he says it's difficult to face a big tournament without him. But Samuel is with me, and he's a great coach. Both Juan Carlos and I believe in him. In the end, we are a team. So, yeah, let's hope it doesn't. He doesn't really have any adverse effect on him, because we want to see the best players in the latter stages. Talking about the best players, so we touched on him a couple of times. He's kind of the player that was on everybody's lips towards the end of last year, especially in that kind of enthralling ATP finals in Turin. The way the crowd bought into Jannik Sinner. I think he was at the San Siro. He really kind of made his name with the Italian public. And he's not really played much since then. Certainly another one who has not played a match. I think I read somewhere he said it doesn't matter. He's quite confident in his ability and how much he's grown recently and how much he's improved. Jannik Sinner, talk to me about his draw, his chances, and I'm going to kind of go against the mold and say I fancy Jannik Sinner for this event just because of what I saw last year.
Cool. I mean, as I said a minute ago, I think this is really the only thing he hasn't done yet. The only thing he hasn't been exceptional yet at. It's basically best of 5 format. I don't think it should be a big difference for him. I think in the long run, he's definitely going to be okay with the form that he showed at the tail end of last year, for sure. He is one of the main contenders. I think it's pretty unclear who is number 2 behind Djokovic among Sinner, Medvedev, and Alcaraz, which already says something. And the warm-ups, I think recently, also a player, of course, Sinner, who has struggled with his fitness a little bit over the course of his career. And I think recently he's shown that he knows his body a little bit better now. He knows how to handle it in order to be at his peak physical capability in every match, or like for the most important events at least. So I also wouldn't worry about it too much. I do think that the first opponent that he has, Botic van de Zandschulp, is probably like the toughest that he can get in the first 3 rounds. So it could be a little tricky, but after like a couple of close sets, I would still expect Sinner to pull away at some point. And then it gets a little easier. I think Matthew earlier was saying like who can stop Sinner, Djokovic from meeting in the semis. And it's pretty hard to find a player like this. Yeah, he's in that section with the other high seeds being in the quarter with the other high seeds being Rublev and de Minaur. So with Alex, of course, he's a phenomenal matchup, hasn't lost to him, just demolishes him every single time. And also you have Rublev, who I don't think is also that big a deal for Sinner at the moment. We've been saying for years that it's a bit of an improved version of what Rublev is trying to do on the court, with just a lot more pace and a lot more variety as well right now with the improvements of Sinner over the past half a year or so. The forefront as well is not looking too dangerous, with like Khachanov, Tiafoe, both these guys being in a very mediocre spot in their careers at the moment. So yeah, I think it's really looking like a Djokovic Sinner semi is kind of unavoidable, and that's good that it's unavoidable, because we do want to see these guys playing for 5 sets. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I couldn't disagree. I think just looking at his draw there, while you were explaining that, I don't see many hurdles putting the way in him, but you never know with tennis. Like you say, injury, anything could strike. Heat. People dealing with heat, especially in Australia, differently, and taking to the conditions. So, but yeah, it's very hard to not see Djokovic and Sinner, and of course Sinner. Starting things off, I think, on the Rod Laver Arena. I think so. It'll be midnight or 1 a.m. my time overnight. So I think that's about 11, 12 o'clock there in Melbourne. So so I'll be trying to maybe sort out the sleep schedule. Maybe go for an afternoon nap to maybe try and catch some of that early doors. Okay, so Medvedev then. I've actually not had a chance to kind of explore Daniil's draw. But yeah, I mean, obviously, again, another guy who I thought this time last year, I think he got beat off Korda in the last 16. I've said it so many times. I've been really impressed by the way he bounced back from that, because I feared he would just turn another kind of journeyman in terms of the sport, maybe not making an impact in the big stages. But he totally proved me wrong in terms of his run after that. And he got to the semi-finals of Wimbledon, the final against Djokovic at US Open, of course going out early at the French. But he likes Melbourne. He's been in the final. He was 2 sets up against Nadal a couple of years ago. Talk to me about Daniil Medvedev and what he can do.
Yeah, he also isn't playing a warm-up, which I think is new to him. Last year he played in Adelaide, lost to Djokovic in the semis. So it's a little weird as well. It's kind of surprising that 3 out of the 4 top seeds aren't playing a warm-up event. It's definitely quite new. But I think over the course of his career, he's also sort of learned what he needs and the sort of rhythm that he needs to be into to get into an event like this. I think he also has a pretty nice draw as well. Rusev-Wari in the second round is a decent threat. But do you really think that he's going to win 3 sets against Daniil? Probably not. I think first round is at Mane. Can't remember the third round at the moment, but it's certainly a pretty soft section in the draw. The troublesome thing for Medvedev right now, and we have it on the screen right now. Yeah, Dimitrov in the forefront. I think that's one where people think he might be in trouble. One thing that's sort of keeping me from saying that is that Dimitrov just has a nightmare. From the early days, Fucsovics, then Ofner or Kokinakis, giant killers only. Then you have Davidovich Fokina in the third round. So I first want to see Dimitrov even getting there, because it's really round by round some of the toughest opponents he could have really gotten. Same really for Hurkacz later on. Higher up in this draw, who could be Medvedev's quarterfinal opponent. It could be Rune as well. I think if it's not Rune, or maybe Dimitrov, it's going to be very hard for Medvedev to lose before the semis as well. I guess the biggest worry right now for Daniil is that against Djokovic, he of course failed somewhat miserably at the US Open. Well, he had that second set, he had that set point in the second set, but still as a whole, definitely doesn't have good memories from that match. And against Alcaraz and Sinner, it seems that both matchups are now troublesome for him, which is kind of weird because, well, against Sinner, he was once 6-0 up in the head-to-head, but he lost the last 3 matches. Yeah. Maybe in the best-of-5 format, it would be a little different. Maybe he would like his chances to wear down Sinner a little bit more. But still, I can't honestly say that right now it's a problem for him that he landed in the Alcaraz section because, well, it was Alcaraz or Djokovic. So both cases don't seem too great for him. And also the fact that he could play maybe even Sinner in the final. Yeah, if he has to win both against Alcaraz and then Sinner or Djokovic, it's just hard to like Daniil's chances at the moment. And that's the main worry for him, which I guess goes for the whole generation of Medvedev, Tsitsipas, Zverev, that the young guys are already better. And yeah, how do you sort of overcome that? And I'm not really buying into Medvedev, especially if he has to beat Rune, Alcaraz, and Djokovic, for example, back to back. That's going to be rough. But he is actually very likely to make the quarters, I believe, or the semis even.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I was just thinking then, in terms of the other 4 then, so we're pretty much in agreement, as a lot of the tennis media will be saying, it's hard to see past these top 4 guys being in the final 4 spots come the last few days of the championships. So we talked about Zverev. He's been playing well. He's fully recovered from that injury wasn't this time last year. Rublev, Tsitsipas, Rune, the other 3 players who make up the top 8. Do we see them making any imprints into the game? I mean, I know Tsitsipas, he starts off with Berrettini, which is one of the tastier first round matches. That should be a blockbuster. But Holger Rune, he started to look as if he was coming back onto a game again at the tail end of last year. But can he make any impact and maybe try and squeeze into that last 4?
I think so. Like I think it's theoretically possible for him to beat Medvedev. By the way, we're talking about Rune, right?
Yeah, Holger Rune, and then we'll come on to
because
Rublev.
I lost it for a moment. And
sorry, it'll be my accent, Damien. It's my strong
accent.
No,
it wasn't actually the accent. I was just replying to a text to a
okay, no problem at all. I wish you just told me it was the accent.
No, sometimes I have to like focus on what you're saying, but most of the time I'm fine. But actually this time it was just a DM. But Rune, I think because I was doing the bracket, the full bracket predictions thing yesterday, just randomly, I had 5 minutes. I don't really do it in a scientific manner because I think the whole institution of the brackets, like it is a little stupid that, one injury can basically like totally end your chances at getting it right. But I did pick Rune over Medvedev. I just think if they get to the quarters, if both of them get there, Rune has a pretty solid shot at exposing, the Daniil defensive positioning, how far behind he stays on the return as well. It's kind of like the Alcaraz thing, where both of them just have so much variety and so many tools to unpack Medvedev's playstyle that I really like that matchup for him in general. Maybe not yet. So far, I guess he hasn't been that successful in it. But I think in the long run, Rune will be pretty troublesome for Medvedev. So if Holger actually gets there, I really like his chances. And this is also going to be that year where, we'll check after the off-season if he's already fine physically in terms of playing long matches at the slams and going deep. That seemed to be maybe improving a little bit around Wimbledon. Of course, at Roland Garros, he still had massive fitness issues. So that's probably one of the main things. And also, he has a pretty tricky draw. Nishioka beat him in Adelaide last year, 2023, at the beginning of the season. Second round, Jarek, Kazo, they're both like at the level that, an absolutely peaking performance from either could really be worrying for any player, really. And I think especially the third round, if Safiullin arrives there or maybe even Fils, that's one that we definitely will be watching out for. Probably Safiullin is the biggest threat, although to Rune's credit, he did defeat Roman in Brisbane, so maybe he'll have some confidence from that. But yeah, it's not an easy draw for Rune, so it's actually kind of likely that if he arrives at a later stage of the event, he might be a little fatigued. Forefront as well against Hurkacz potentially, or like whoever is into that draw as well. Humbert, Zhang, Menchik maybe, because we do have the qualifiers, of course, by now. And Menchik is playing Shapovalov and then potentially Hurkacz or Jasica. So I would say that Rune just has a very sort of tough round-by-round breakdown of the draw. And that might be an issue for a player who has previously struggled to like keep it up over multiple long matches.
And I wonder what court, do we know what court his match is on yet? After him.
I haven't looked at the schedule, but
him taking over Twitter, I think it was, at the US Open, complaining about being moved court and not being on one of the main show courts. He was out in the sticks, I think, and he wasn't too happy about that. Finally, Andrei Rublev, just in terms of the players, the top 8, Andrei Rublev won in Hong Kong right at the start of the year. Again, people were maybe talking like he's maybe added a little bit of dimension. He's not just all power anymore. Have you been seeing any differences in the Rublev game? Has he been doing anything different to kind of actually try and break this, cycle of getting close but not close enough?
Yeah, I think Hong Kong was just an event that he won, like playing on his 85% level, which is fine. Like that's the main strength of Andrei Rublev right now, that he has this base level, the foundation that he can always sort of just go back to. And the B game, A game disparity doesn't exist really, which sometimes hurts him in the latter stages of the slams, like the quarterfinals where he's like 0-7. But I do think that this is a pretty nice draw for him in that he, again, has a very good shot at getting far. I don't know if I see him beating Sinner, though, and that's like the main issue here, because we all expect Sinner to make the quarters. So it could be another quarterfinal exit. If he plays Deminor in the 4th round, I also think that could be a pretty close match. But basically, I just expect that, even if Rublev is again at his B game, at like 80% of what he can do, it's still probably a draw that still sees him like in the quarterfinals, 4th round, whatever, somewhere around that, because it's simply like comfortable enough that he won't have to get out of that second gear potentially.
Okay, lovely stuff. Okay, and just talking about the first round draw, then we'll stick for this for now. I'm going to put you on the spot about Damien, and I'm going to ask you 3 things. I'm going to ask you shock of the first round. Where do you think if there is any shocks, where do you think that might come? I want you to tell me the match of the first round. What viewers or what the guys, the punters, what match should we definitely be tuning in for? And I want you to ask you. You know a lot of these guys who have qualified, they've come through the Challenger Tour, they've been on the scene, and even if it's potentially their debut, who'll be the breakthrough? Do you think who's going to make a breakthrough? It doesn't have to win it, maybe get to the 2nd or 3rd round, but maybe who would be the kind of breakthrough you think that this Australian Open?
Yeah, I do have answers already for the last 2 questions. I don't know about the first one, but I'm gonna figure it out on the way. So
well, I'll tell you what. Answer the first 2, and then we can maybe come back to that one.
Yeah. I'm gonna start maybe from what my favorite round 1 matches are. It's definitely not the mainstream BS like Tsitsipas, Berrettini, or Roger Aliassime team.
Yeah,
I understand why they are big. I understand why there's gonna be a lot of spotlight on them. But no, that's not where I'm heading to. That's not what I'm gonna be watching.
Sounds
unless
good.
It's like a suitable.
This is why I asked you, so that I can go and look for this match that you're about to say.
Yeah, my two favorite ones are, for one thing, Safiullin against Griekspoor, and then the whole thing that can sort of result in that section. So one of these guys playing against Fils as well. I think it's pretty clear that Safiullin and Fils are one of the two most dangerous unseeded players in the draw, along with Draper, maybe Arnaldi as well. So the combination of them in this one section is amazing. But starting, from the first round, which is what you asked about, I think Safiullin against Griekspoor right now is definitely one of the matches to watch, just based on the Russians' form and how the maybe irregular, the play style that couldn't really be repeated over the course of the last few years. Suddenly, he's like finding it all the time. I do think he's actually the favorite in this match, but I would be surprised if Griekspoor, even though he didn't start the year that well at the United Cup, I would be surprised if he goes down quickly. And I think maybe even my favorite one is Marozsan against Cilic. Cilic, he played only that one match in Hong Kong, but I will still say that up until 6-3, 5-2, he was insane. I couldn't believe how well he was playing for the break that was that long. And I was like, okay, so Cilic returned. He like waited enough for the return to make sense, for the health to be in check. Of course, then he blew 9 match points and lost. But I did enjoy it so much. And I think that Cilic potentially could have a run in this event as well. Like if he beats Marozsan, there's like Fritz in his section, then Tsitsipas when it comes to the seeds. I think he could play France Cerundolo in the second round. These are all gettable. I don't know if I can pick him for the quarters just now because, well, he's only had one match. He also played an exhibition, which I guess doesn't matter again, but he played a match. He got a win. He had that winning feeling, I guess, again, which clearly was an issue when he played Struff.
You're not going to mention who you beat, are you?
He played Andy Murray, But I wasn't sure, honestly. I wasn't following too much, but I was just, okay, so Cilic got a win. He might have it a little easier right now to clinch something. So that's why I think Cilic actually can have a run here. And the reason why I think he's the favorite over Marozsan is just I wasn't too impressed with Fabi's performance against Shelton in Auckland. We were doing the commentary, I think, with Vange for this, and he was like not playing his usual, baseball tennis, like end the point in 3 or 4 shots. He was just sort of content with rolling it back into the middle for Shelton to attack, really. And that's not the game that Fabian Marozsan is known for. That's not the game that brought him to the top 100. I don't know if this is going to continue because actually against Monfils in the opening round, he was, just fine. So maybe it's not a big deal, but I see Cilic as the favorite there. And if he does win it, if he is going to be like, if it's going to be sustainable, that sort of quality that I saw against Struff, I actually believe in him having a bit of a run here. The breakout question, the third one, I think I have to talk about Jakub Mensik. I think Elena also said that she thinks Mensik versus Rune will happen. I don't know if I'm going that deep. but he definitely has a nice chance against Shapovalov. He when Shapovalov played Offner in Hong Kong, the returning was just awful. The second serve as well, but the return especially. So when I'm thinking of Menchik playing Shapovalov right now and the serve of Menchik against the return of Shapovalov, wow, that's not even close, really. I'm probably even more impressed with Menchik that he actually qualified rather than for that round 1 match against Nakashima, because he was facing some issues later against, well, players who are worse than Nakashima. And while I know that he can have a peak performance, which he certainly did in the past couple of weeks, both times against Brandon, then he actually handled Gaio and Mayo, who were making it a little troublesome for him with just making a lot of balls and forcing him to play. I don't know if he played it smart, really, because especially against Gaio, and there was a pressure point, he would just add even more pace to his forehand. But, it worked out. He was landing it, so it's fine. And I think when he plays Hurkacz in round 2, and that looks pretty, it looks very likely that he will, because Hurkacz has an opener against Jasika, he has against Shapovalov. I think that's actually a super close match. In fact, Menchik a couple of years ago was compared to Hurkacz a little bit in the juniors. Okay. They have like a similar body type. I just think Menchik is a bit of a Hurkacz with more pace off the ground, like Hurkacz who can actually play very aggressively off the ground. And I do think it's a very good combination. And also against a player like Hurkacz, I think he'll be able to sort of survive the fact that the lack of experience isn't really going to matter. It will maybe be more important against a player who will just, keep the ball in play a bit more. But when it's just like a big serving contest, I think he's going to do absolutely fine. So, I would say that Menchik will be very tough for Hurkacz in the second round. And if he wins that, then the draw really opens up as well. Of course, it would be a huge thing for him to make the second week. But after all, he did qualify at the US Open. He made the third round, but through an easier draw. I mean, that I have to admit. Droguet and Barrère were his main draw opponents there that he beat. And of course, losing to Fritz on his 18th birthday. Now, when it comes to the upset of the first round.
You got it. Brilliant.
Still not sure. But I'm looking at it.
Just while you do that, just to remind people about what's happening with the draw. So the Australian Open it'll be the top half of the men's draw is going to be scheduled Sunday, Monday, and the bottom half Monday, Tuesday. I'm just trying to find some of the matches. John has kindly put up the Shapovalov Menchik match. I think Marushan Cilic is on, I think, third on the 1573, second on the 1573 arena, so that could be about 2 a.m. through the night, so many different stories going on. I'm just looking at Rublev, Thiago Wild, so I think that one could be decent. I think we talked about this at the start of the US Open in terms of what's your favourite time of a Grand Slam? And I think you said, the first few days, the first 2 or 3 days, just because there's just so much tennis on and there's so many different storylines. It's exciting. So where are we? We were talking about a shock of the first round. John is suggesting Murray beating Echeverry. There's a lot of people.
But that's not a shock, right?
I was about to say there's a lot of people in that Talking Tennis WhatsApp chat.
I would go Echeverry, but it wouldn't be a shock if Murray won, of course.
Yeah, I think there wouldn't be too many happy folk. At least 4 of us, I think, in that in the Talking Tennis WhatsApp, they would take exception to him calling that a shock. Anyone else then? In terms of, is there anyone who might, Murray to push Djokovic in round 3? Well, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? So anything else in round 1 that maybe you think there could be a sneak of an upset?
Yeah, it's actually kind of hard to find something. A lot of the sort of players that I think would potentially make upsets against other seeds are playing seeds that they can't really do much against, like, I don't know, Kepfer against Zverev. To an extent, Fucsovics against Dimitrov as well, but that could actually be close. But I definitely also have a few second round potential shocks. Like Lloyd Harris, I think will beat Sebastian Korda in the second round, for example. I don't know if that's shocking at all. But I think this is also not a shock at all. But I have this sneaky suspicion that Borna Coric will defeat Frances Tiafoe in the first round. So maybe that's it.
Yeah, fair enough. And it's funny because when I was just going through the matches, that was one that I went, nobody's actually talking about this. I feel like Tiafoe is playing, his best tennis right now. So yeah, that could be another interesting one. I'll let you away with that one then, Damien. And a true professional would have asked you this question in a text earlier on this morning to allow you to be ready for the question. So next time I'll make sure to give you plenty of time for it.
That's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. I do know the draw. It's just a matter of there not really being like many opportunities for shocks. It's not really a thing. Yeah. At first I was like, I don't even know which match I should tell you. But right now, having looked through the draw again, the shock potential just isn't really there in the opening round. I guess the players that we are expecting to go deep, they usually have a pretty simple opener. So
yeah. No, I get that. What else was on we've hit the hour mark, so I know we'll wrap up soon. Is there anything else about the Aussie Open then that people watching and listening, should be keeping an eye out for at all? Anything else you want to cover before we kind of do any other business?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's basically a case of the top 4 seeds being so strong that we are mostly looking at who can beat them. And honestly, even the seeds of 5 to 8 are really other than Tsitsipas, I guess. But then Tsitsipas also has a nice draw. If he actually gets through the first few rounds, I think Marin Cilic could stop him. I'll say that again.
You've got a sneaky suspicion.
The other seeds,
I think you've got a sneaky one for Cilic going to at least the quarterfinals.
Quarterfinals, let's go. Marin Cilic quarterfinals. I'm gonna say it. And just also, it doesn't really matter who plays Novak Djokovic in the quarterfinals, right? So I can say Marin Cilic, and it still doesn't impact the event that much, because if it's Fritz or Tsitsipas, it's literally the same for Djokovic. But that second quarter is just pretty. That second section is just pretty weak to me, and. The seeds, especially there, Fritz, Cerundolo, Musetti, Tsitsipas, they're all vulnerable. But other than that, like 7 of the top 8 seeds, I think have a very good chance of making it into the quarterfinals. Maybe Rune is the one with the trickiest draw, but otherwise the other 6, it's gonna be tough to stop them. Maybe Rublev can be stopped by like Deminor, but especially the first 5 alongside, the first 4 plus Zverev. They kind of look like locks for the quarters, and hopefully it's not going to be like that. Hopefully it's going to be tennis giving us some weird or wild. I don't even know which word I wanted to say, but weird or wild upsets again.
Yeah. And John's just showing us there that he's only got one picture of Marin Cilic. It's probably the 3rd time I've seen that picture on our screen. So I think he needs to try and invest in more archive photographs. Just to finish up then, it's an exciting time. It's on the eve. There we go again. The one sole picture he has of Marin Cilic. I was going to ask you just other ATP news or other ATP goings on before we wrap up. Have you watched New Season Breakpoint yet? Have you seen any of that yet? Me neither.
No, and I'm not going to. I watched one episode of the original Breakpoint, and it was actually in Bonn because John was watching it, and I was like,
and John made you do it. John had you
no.
Actually, watch this.
He was just watching it in the living room, and I was like, I think I was about to go to bed, but then I just sat down and ended up watching this. I was sort of curious. Like, I wasn't curious enough to watch it on my own, but if it was already there, and I had someone to talk about it with as well at the same time, I was like, okay, why not? It was the Madrid episode of like Jabeur, Badosa, and
Zachary.
And I found it very, very like weird in terms of it doesn't really go for like any group. For hardcore fans, no. For casual fans, not really. And for people who just start out with tennis, not really. So that's why I'm also not interested in Breakpoint Season 2 at all. From what I've read on Twitter, it has like changed the narratives a little bit, but it also hasn't improved. There's the big elephant in the room when it comes to Zverev as well. There's the thing that they don't really show the match at all. I'm not saying this has to be about the match only. I know that would maybe be better for the hardcore fans then, but like even the casuals, I really struggle to see how it would make people like get interested in tennis. However, recently, I think it was Anastasia who told us, I think that at the US Open, when she was there, there was a lot of people waiting around for an Alja Tomljanovic practice, for example. and that they were actually all there because like they didn't know tennis at all. They just wanted to see, Berrettini's girlfriend, like literally. And because of breakpoints. So that was weird to me. Like that was the first time I've heard something like this, that someone actually got interested in tennis enough to go to the venue at the US Open because of breakpoints. Like I felt like I was in a different reality when she told me this. So I don't know what to think about that. I certainly feel like a lot of the casual tennis fans that I know here in Poland, no one watched breakpoint.
Fair enough. No, I haven't watched it. I actually watched the first, I think, 6 episodes of season 1, and then didn't return to it when it came back in June, just because I wasn't captivated by its content. I agree with you. I think people like yourself and I and others maybe want to try and get under. I find the real behind the scenes. Not that it just feels all managed. It all feels kind of staged, doesn't it? And then my final question, how have you been getting on with the new ATP website? I just wanted to gauge your thoughts because I've heard mixed reviews and people don't like change. So I thought, why not just throw it in there as any other business? So ATP website, yes or no?
No. A big no. I don't know why we should improve on something that was already good in the first place. I think the ATP website, especially compared to the WTA, was awesome. There was a lot of easy to get info, sort of on the first click. Whereas right now, sometimes there's info that I can't even get to. Like, for example, the career high ranking thankfully came back, but it's all a bit messy still with the sort of UI. And there's a lot of info that I now have to click like 10 times to get to. I hope they will be fixing some of that. I think the graphic design actually isn't that good either. There's like some random banners when it's like a random pattern and nothing there, for example. There's this one black and white thing that I really don't understand how it makes it onto a website like this. For me, it's definitely sort of even making my life harder with some work that I do. I know it's like this for a lot of people. I basically a few things that I was able to get off the ATP website in the past. Now I have to get to other sources for it.
Right. Yeah.
I have to go to other sources, and of course, these other sources don't have to function forever. So because they're not done by the ATP, they're not done by a huge corporation. They're like passion projects. So it could really be troublesome in the future. But I think the only thing that works better. No, actually, it's designed better is the new Challenger TV look. It looks really neat. It's easy to switch between events. It's easy to see sort of what's going on at right now. Which, if you're like maybe a fan who's not turning on to the match that you want to watch, but just turn on Challenger TV and these matches are on right now. Like that's really easy, and I like that. It's just that it's also not working properly. Like today we had the Oeiras final, for example. Huge next-gen clash, Leandro Ridi, Martin Dam, and the stream isn't there. There's still issues with the replays. There are also issues with like, this is even hard to explain, but like there's a match going on and it suddenly jumps back to a previous time in that match. And it sort of jumps back and forth. I tried to explain it to the media manager of the ATP Challenger Tour. I don't think he quite got it, but he sent it over to the tech support. It hasn't improved since. So there's a lot of things that don't work or like just are extremely weird right now on the ATP website. I absolutely hate it, but at the same time, there, at least for now, we have other sources to get this info from. Yeah. So I'm fine with it. I just wish, especially Challenger TV, would start working a little bit better. I understand that there has to be a sort of a introductory time, even especially as not only the graphic website of the graphic update of the website, but also the whole Challenger streaming changed in that there's better quality and the streaming system. I guess the provider is probably different now. So I understand there's a bit of a learning curve for them as well.
Yeah.
But I do hope that some of the issues that people have been raising will be addressed pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, don't fix what ain't broken, I think they say. But listen, Damien, good way to finish. I'm looking forward to engaging with you over the next couple of weeks about what is going on. We are on the eve of the Australian Open. The sleeping patterns will be gone for the next couple of weeks at least. Thanks very much, Damien. Guys who are watching, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We're on 5223 subscribers. We need to try and get to 6,000 by the end of March, or John Silk will make us watch Breakpoint Season 2. So hit the like and subscribe button. I've been Tom Grant and Damien. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. And we'll speak to you again soon. All right. See you later.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.